everyone, my name is Kristina Ishmael. My pronouns are she and her, and I serve as the Acting Director of the Office of Educational Technology here at the U.S. Department of Education. I started my education career as a classroom teacher. I started as an early childhood teacher, teaching preschool, kindergarten, second grade, to the majority of my emerging bilingual students in Omaha, Nebraska. And it wasn't until I left the classroom for the state level, and then after that, the federal level, that I recognized the importance of educator voice in policy. And that is what I get to bring in my job. And so not only are we setting the national policy for ed tech within the Office of Ed Tech and casting kind of the vision of how we want to see ed tech really shape teaching and learning, but we're also providing that real practitioner voice in our policy. And I do that not only within our office, but also within our policies across the agency. So there is a group of teachers here at Ed that are previous teachers and practitioners that get the opportunity to provide that perspective in our policies. And that is really critical in the work that we do. Funny enough, I did not start in education. I had every intention of going into music business, which is a very, very different field from where I find myself now. And my first round at university was at Arizona State University, and I pursued a degree in business and mass communications, again with the intention to go into music business or some form of marketing and PR. And honestly, I had a massive panic attack whenever I went in for an interview with a headhunter whenever I got to Omaha. And it took that moment, along with some therapy and, kind of processing the things that I really loved and wanted to do, to be like, oh, education is actually where my heart is, and that is what I wanted to pursue. So I was working on a post-baccalaureate program, or working in a post-baccalaureate program while I was teaching preschool, so I could get my actual certificates to teach early childhood and elementary. And then that took me into the classroom and actually into a school district from there. I miss the learners that I worked with on a daily basis, primarily because they were emerging bilinguals, and I loved not only the content acquisition, those aha moments that we all know, but also the language acquisition, when they could give me certain words in English, or when they could code switch in between the languages, whether it was Spanish, French, whatever their home language it was, that they could switch over and tell me what they were trying to say and communicate in English. Those are some pretty special moments, and I do miss those. Emerging bilingual is really a way of using asset-based language to think about English learners. We've historically said ESL, ELL, EL, whatever the acronym is for English as a second language, English learners, and we're flipping that, and we're using that asset-based language and saying, it's already an asset that they speak whatever their home language is, their heritage language. And then when they come to us here in the US, in our public school system, we teach in English. There are certainly dual language programs and biliterate programs or bilingual programs, but predominantly we teach in English. And so we want to recognize that they are emerging bilingual and that they are learning two languages. So I interestingly had a mixed K-12 experience. I went to a private Christian school for the majority of my elementary years, and then made the weird and awkward transition into middle school in a public school in 7th grade, and that is very weird and awkward, as I mentioned, and then stayed in the public school system through 12th grade, which is great. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and in middle school, whenever I did enter the public school system, that is when I first started taking Spanish. That's how I learned how to speak in Spanish. I'm incredibly grateful for that. One of my absolute favorite teachers I actually reconnected with in 2016 when I first started in this office as a fellow, and it was Teacher Appreciation Week, and I was able to find him on social media, and we have stayed connected ever since, and that is Mark Vanover, who was my 11th grade American history teacher, and we actually had a block schedule for that American Studies, so it was our 11th grade English and American history together. And so Mr. Helfrich and Mr. Vanover were my two amazing teachers, and Mr. Vanover is now teaching over in San Diego, California, and it's so wild to think that we've reconnected and been able to share things about education now. And he's still in the classroom. He's teaching AP US history, like he's teaching APUSH, and obviously a lot of things that are happening in our world now. So he's bringing that into the classroom every day. I would also be remiss if I didn't say something about my theater teacher, Mr. Fountain. That was an incredible experience in my high school, being a part of shows and productions and behind the scenes and backstage and all of the things. It was an incredible opportunity, and I carry that with me every single day, especially in public presentations and teaching and all of the different things. Yeah, it's pretty special. I joined this office in April 2016 and then bridged administration through April 2017. And this was like a well-oiled machine. This agency, this team, we had a lot of work to get done and in a short amount of time. And so I joined a team that was incredibly efficient and effective and loved what they were doing. It was right after the release of the 2016 National Ed Tech Plan when Zach Chase was taking this out into the world. And I got to come alongside and support his work with all of the Go Open and OER work. So 2 final events that we had in December 2016 were at the White House. And that's, again, very special. Those are things that will stick with me forever. We had the opportunity to go bowling at the White House with that team, and that is a memory I will never forget. And then now I think to the memories that I get to make in this office now. I've been here since October, and we are a small and mighty team. There are technically, if I count on my fingers, there are 6 of us, including myself. 1 career staff member and 4 fellows. And those are short-term fellows. So they are here for a finite period of time to provide their expertise and subject matter expertise. And then they go off into the world. And so we have this really lovely team with wonderful dynamics, and that we openly collaborate and communicate with one another. And this is really the first time I've had the opportunity to lead a team like this. And so I set the expectations right away, saying I want us to have a good work-life balance. I want us to maintain those boundaries. I want us to openly talk about mental health, especially because we're having those conversations here at the department anyway. And I want us to talk about that with, amongst our team members. And holding space for those conversations is really important. We've had a couple of interns come in this spring semester, and right away they were really lovely. They just jumped right in and joined the team, but then also they were incredibly respectful in those kind of expectations. And they said, I haven't really worked on a team where we openly talk about these things, or in our standing team meeting, if there are some really heavy events in the world, we hold space for that. And we can have those conversations because we've developed that culture. And that's really incredible. So there might not be specific events where bowling at the White House may happen. Who knows? COVID might allow us to get in there at some point. But I can tell you this team is pretty incredible. I think the first person I think of influencing my general kind of trajectory in education is actually my dad. We spent a lot of time talking about education and talking about the things that we were learning in my house. And I knew that education was important. He instilled that from the very beginning. And it was made evident by the fact that at one point when he lost his job and we were living out of the church food pantry for a couple of years, we still managed to scrape up enough money for him to be able to take 1 class at a time and finally get his bachelor's degree. It took him over 10 years to get that, and he actually graduated 2 months before he passed away in 2001. And so he's a huge influence in my life when it comes to education. And again, when I put the pieces together and I'm like, oh, yeah, education, I was supposed to go into education from the very beginning. I think some other folks that have made a huge impact in my life are the director of English Language Arts whenever I was at the state level, Trisha Parker, who's gone on to do wonderful things with Ed Reports and is now with another organization. Just the level of professionalism and subject matter expertise that she brought around literacy, and we would talk about, she taught 5th grade. Obviously, you've kind of heard what I taught, and so we would talk a lot about early childhood and elementary education and literacy development, and I learned so much from her. And then Joseph South, who served as the director of the Office of Ed Tech whenever I first came here in 2016, was an incredible leader and mentor, and continues to be. I can text him any day and he'll respond within minutes, and that kind of person in my life is incredibly important. I would be remiss if I didn't say that there were also a ton of women that have helped kind of shape me in this position, whether they're in education, they've been in nonprofits, or just colleagues that I've learned from. I think it's incredibly important to lift up the role of women in leadership, and there are so many of them that I could name, but some that come top to mind, of course, are Karen Cater, who served in this office, Susan Patrick. I also think of Erin Moat, who is an incredible colleague and friend of mine, Julia Fallon, so many women that have made a huge impact in my life. I think there are a couple of things. So this is where I think the background as a practitioner certainly comes to play, whether it's in early childhood, working with emerging bilingual students, having directly experienced and worked with educational technology and learners, but then also having worked at the state and now federal level. It's a pretty niche kind of perspective that I can provide. So I am part of some of these conversations that are not necessarily inclusive of ed tech or digital, but I can still contribute to the conversation, and that's incredibly important to me. So I think it kind of runs a spectrum as far as what I could contribute as far as the expertise is concerned. When I think about what I have most recently focused on, I think of open educational resources, anything around fair use within education and kind of curriculum adoption, and of course ed tech. But it's not just the nuts and bolts or the boxes and wires either. It's thinking about it from a system and having the perspective of being in a classroom to state level to federal level is a very unique perspective in that sense, where you can think about the change management that's required when you are introducing ed tech into the classroom, but then also thinking about the impact that it has on an individual educator and then their learners in the classroom.